And we're live. Good morning. This is Overheard Overnight for Monday, April the 22nd. I'm Chris Morales, and this morning we're talking about grief. Good grief. Is it really? And does it ever end? My grief began in about March of 2022, and that was when Sally was first diagnosed with what we thought was vertigo. Now, she's an incredibly brave soul, lots of tolerance for pain. So, the first couple of months, we were back and forth to her family doctor, getting ears cleaned out, getting medication, getting all sorts of things, but nothing seeming to really work. The thing that triggered for me, though, the start of grief was when she gave up driving. Now, if you know Sally at all, and even if you don't, she loves driving and she loved her Volvo. And to give up driving the Volvo, that said something. But me, of course, the optimist, didn't really think much of it. But the grief is kind of sitting underneath all that, right? A few months later, we get the diagnosis because things do not improve. We do get some scans and some diagnosis that she's got worse than vertigo. It's actually brain cancer. 3 tumors in the brain. That was one of those days when you couldn't go into the hospital. So I was sitting in the car outside with Milo in the rain while she's inside the clinic with the doctors and the specialists, and they're breaking the news. So that's one of those disconnects that happens that you look back on and go, wow, yeah, only through COVID, right? Anyway, we get home and, you face the reality of what that is. Takes a couple of days for that to sink in. And then you realize, well, hey, let's tackle this. Been through this before. I mean, how bad can this really be? Ugh. To say those words today is just one of those things. We go for it, man. We go for it. She says, yep, let's get going. And very soon after that, she's scheduled for surgery. And brain surgery, of course, very scary thing. They go in, they can remove one of the tumors, but 2 of them they can't. She's in recovery with the expectation that we're going to go on to some other treatments. And this now is in around May, maybe early June. Expectation that the vertigo symptoms will go away and that, she'll be back to walking, maybe a bit more slowly. Maybe she'll need a walker, but there's still optimism here. We're still on that path of recovery. Summer doesn't improve, unfortunately. We get through July, August, into her birthday, end of August, and she can't walk. With assistance sometimes, but is now wheelchair bound. And, you're going in your brain, what the heck is happening here? We're supposed to be improving. There's supposed to be improvement. She's had some radiation treatment. My grief is starting to build a little bit because now I'm grieving something that I used to have, which was a fully mobile wife you could converse with. She is having some moments of disconnect with reality. It's the best way I can do to describe it. But you're kind of off, right? Things start to feel a bit wobbly. Had a great birthday party, though. All the kids were here, grandkids were here, some great pictures and videos of them playing on the bed through the end of September. She's a fighter, tolerance for pain, and we're going through all the treatments. Now we get into September and things do really take a downward swing. Pain starts to intensify. I'm now sleeping weird hours, not really having a good handle on anything other than her care, and that was the focus. We get through September, we get into October, made one attempt to go down to Toronto General Emergency one night just to, get a handle on some of this. We couldn't make it that night. She was out. 2 nights later, though, we did get into Toronto Western, and after, hate to say it, but about an 18-hour experience, sitting in the waiting room Friday evening into the overnight, we get into the doctor finally, and thankfully she'd had a scan a couple of days before to find out why she's not walking. Why is there so much pain? And that look that someone gives you when they walk into a room and they're going to give you some bad news? That was the experience that I had that night, and so did Sally. She's lying there, and the doctor comes in and says, well, we've figured out what the new problem is, and that is you have a tumor on your spine. And we think that's compressing the nerves. Therefore, that is what's causing the lack of ability to walk. Again, There's that bubbling underneath of, oh my, this is terrible news. You're definitely grieving, the reality now that there's more surgery ahead, right? Again, bit of optimism. It's gone down and been tamped down just a little bit more. However, we're still optimistic, and we get admitted to a room, and surgery is scheduled for 48 hours after we get this diagnosis, and she has the back surgery. Admitted into recovery, again with the expectation that it's a very short trip. She'll heal, and then we put her into some rehab, and then of course she's going to come back home. It's going to be changed a bit, so we're going to have to look at different sleeping arrangements, that funky bed that they have in the hospital that articulates, looking into things like that. Care at home with personal support workers, looking into that as well. However, she doesn't recover. We're at Western. The mind starts to get wonky. And after a series of scans, they realize they can't treat her here. We've got to get her back out of a recovery hospital into a treatment hospital, and she gets back into Princess Margaret. This is now, we're looking at late November, early December, and doctors don't have a good answer on this. And these are some of the best specialists in the world. They can't figure out what's going on. And things just get worse, right? She just gets even worse in terms of her ability to communicate with us. And that's one of the things that grief kind of does from an outward perspective. You looking in, I guess me looking into what's going on, are grieving now a bigger loss, the loss of the person you used to know, the loss of the person who was. She's not here anymore. The person you used to know isn't here anymore. You've lost that. And that's probably the only loss that I could feel at that time. Because coming up to the big day of early December, they do finally get the diagnosis. And of course, and maybe I haven't shared this with you, but she had a portal. Fabulous hospital system, by the way. She had a portal where the tests would get put into that as soon as they've completed. And then you can log in and see what they are. And of course, you do that after this particular test, and you see two words pop up in there, and you have no idea what they are. And then, of course, you're tempted to Google it. And despite my best efforts, I had to Google it, and I don't recommend you Google these two words, but leptomeningeal disease. It is fatal. It is not treatable. And we have the family meeting with the doctors where we find out from an array of people sitting around the room that day. I'll never forget it. Beautiful, sunny, early winter day up on the 16th floor of the hospital. She's lying in bed completely out of it. I'm sitting beside, and there's 6 doctors in front of me. And the lead doctor, super gentleman, he is going to break the news. And the news is that it's fatal, it's terminal, and she's advanced. You take a breath. Not quite sure what washes over you at that point, besides saying that cliche word again, grief. But here we are sitting there, and I look over at her and I say, do you want to know what the prognosis is? Because up until this point, she never did. Wanted to stay with the belief that you're going to get out of this thing, you're going to come back, you're going to create something new. She nodded, and so he broke the news. He said, we had about 3 months. Unfortunately, I thought she was going to go into palliative care. Unfortunately, it didn't last that long, because at 3:20 a.m. on Monday, I'm going to say it's a Sunday, but it's 3:20 a.m. on January the 8th of 2023, Sally passed away. 3:20 is stuck in my mind. I live with that. I wake up to that most weeks, most days, and just seem to can't get by that number, right? So there are some questions that pop out of all of this. When did the grief begin? Well, for me, it began back in 2022. Yes, she died on a certain day. And the real grief of dealing with the loss is now, tangible and it just aches. What does it feel like? It feels like stumbling really in a pea soup fog at night in the twilight zone. You don't know where you're going. Nothing is familiar. Everything is foreign. And you're wondering, is this thing ever going to lift? Is it ever going to end? Recently, I popped up in Facebook an image of a sculpture sitting on a bench with a huge hole in the center. And that's really what it is like. There's a void. Something's missing. There's a hole. There's something just not there anymore. One of the counseling sessions I actually participated in, I'd said, I've lost Sally. And the counselor was so good in the way he said it, but boy, did it ever rip another hole in you. He said, well, Chris, you haven't lost her. Like, you're not going to find her again, right? From that perspective, what you've lost is that memory, the memory of the person. What you've really lost is your future with that person. And then the aha moments start to happen. They start slowly at first. However, what happens is you start to realize that the person really isn't gone in memory, but that's the past. The future hasn't happened yet. Future with her, without your person hasn't happened yet. So whatever you create next is going to be the reality, is going to be the present. And the real aha moment happens when you realize there is new life out of this. And folks have asked me, friends have asked me, family have asked me, when's the new you going to come along? There's no new you. It's just me here, folks. It's just me here, guys. I'm creating new life. Whatever that life looks like, that's what it is. Things are not the same, never will be. However, one of the real keys to understanding this for me, anyway, has been the birth of my latest grandson. Little guy's about a week and a day old now. And you hold him for the first time and realize this is new life. And then I just kind of had that moment where I went, and that's where I am too. I am creating a new life. There are a few things I've learned along the way. Share them with you, not to belittle or belabor or tell you how to make it work, because grief is different for everybody. The first one would be, nothing from the past is the same. Nothing that existed before matters today. That's, to be blunt, that's basically the first one. I'm building out new relationships with people, with the world, basically with everybody. And a real tangible one has been, I've connected and reconnected, if you will, with my sisters in a much more intimate way, in the sense that we talk now way more regularly. Like, I probably bug them once or twice a day. New way of communicating, in other words. There's a poem that I was given, and at the time it was just super crazy to kind of go through it. And it's called Remember Me, but there's a line from it that I just love. And it goes like this. It says, I've left something of myself with you. Remember me just for that. The last one I'd say to you is that, I have learned a bit more now how to deal with being alone and understanding the differences, the nuances, if you will, between being alone, and being lonely. There are moments when the loneliness is crushing. There's no question about that. But I quite like the fact that I can now move forward with just worrying about me. And that sounds extremely selfish. But in that process, I'm now able to identify and connect with other people, I hope, much more directly and much more deeply. So, folks, that's grief. Starts with a monstrous outwardness, feeling like victim. You pull it inward to deal with all the issues that you have to deal with on the inside. And then there's new life that comes along, the birth of a new little boy that points you in the direction that you need to kind of go towards. So until next time, be good to each other.